Welcome to NBC News. This is latest news for you. First read is your briefing from Meet the Press and the NBC political unit on the day's most important political stories and why they matter. Despite all of the recent allegations against Republican Roy Moore, one reason why political observers still believe he can pull out a win 3 weeks from now is that the race takes place in Alabama, a state Donald Trump won by 28 points in 2016, 62% to 34%. But as our colleague Dante Cheney reminds us, Alabama voters have never considered the controversial Moore to be your average Republican politician. In 2012, Cheney writes, Moore, running for state Supreme Court Chief Justice, underperformed Mitt Romney by 9 points in Alabama. Romney carried 61% of the vote in the state, while Moore, who had already been ousted once for defying a federal order to remove his monument of the Ten Commandments inside the state's judicial building, got 52. When all the results were in, Romney won 9 more Alabama counties in the presidential race, 52 of them, than Moore did in his contest, 43, Cheney adds. Even in Moore's home county of Etowah, Romney outperformed Moore, and by a wide margin, 13.68% for Romney to 55% for Moore. Overall, the presidential and the state chief justice races produced about the same number of votes, a little more than 2 million in each. But Romney won 204,000 more votes out of Alabama than Moore did in 2012. Bottom line, Roy Moore always had vulnerabilities going into his general election matchup with Democrat Doug Jones. Now it's possible that Moore can still win in this overwhelmingly GOP-leaning state, even though a Fox News poll showed him trailing Jones by 8 points. No one, after all, knows who exactly will turn out in a December 12 election. But consider what Trump said about Moore when he was campaigning for Luther Strange back in September. I have to say this, Luther will definitely win. Roy has a very good chance of not winning in the general election. I was a 14-year-old trying to play in an adult's world, and he was 32 years old. As for the recent allegations against Moore, his first accuser, Lee Corfman, appeared on Today This Morning. Corfman told NBC Savannah Guthrie, Moore took me to his home, he proceeded to seduce me, he removed my clothing, he touched me over my clothing. What was left of that? I was a 14-year-old trying to play in an adult's world, and he was 32 years old. Meanwhile, on Sunday, Alabama's 3 largest papers, the Birmingham News, the Mobile Press-Register and the Huntsville Times, ran this editorial on their front pages: Stand for Decency, Reject Roy Moore. NBC's Mike Mamoli spoke to Alabama voters about Moore and Democrat Doug Jones. I'm just not going to vote for Roy Moore in this situation, Frank Cook, a lifelong Republican who voted for Moore over Strange in the September GOP runoff, told Mamoli after attending church services in Montgomery. My wife is a Democrat. She has convinced me that in this situation, that I need to be voting Democratic. And I agree with her. But 10 days after the Washington Post first detailed women's accusations of unwanted sexual advances by Moore, followed by more accusations and furious pushback from the judge and his supporters, many worshippers on Sunday were reluctant to weigh in on how the developments had altered, or not, their view on the Senate race. Mamoli writes, We're hearing way too much, Walter Corbett said, after attending First United's early morning service with his wife. We really just hope that the best outcome will happen and that God will take care of the state and for the country. The Senate race is going to come and go, and God's still going to be in control, Mary Corbett, his wife, added. You have to vote your conscience and ultimately leave it up to a prayerful. Trump fired off these tweets over the weekend and this morning, before his 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time cabinet meeting, when NBC's Andrea Mitchell, filling in for Chuck Todd, asked Director Mick Mulvaney on Meet the Press why corporate tax cuts are permanent under the Senate bill, but individual ones are temporary. He responded,